Welcome back for another episode of Strive for 25. Joel Farrell here, and looking forward to sharing with you our guest today.
To another episode of the Strive for 25 podcast. And I've got an awesome guest today, John Mendez, who is another podcast host with the Walk to Wealth podcast. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Joel, man, excited to be here, and I'm excited to see where our conversation takes us today.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start just with the podcast. How long have you been doing it so far?
Yeah, so the short answer, I've been doing it a little over. First trailer episode dropped December 2021. First official episode dropped January 16th, 2022.
Okay. And how many episodes in are you for the listeners?
We just dropped 91, drops tomorrow from the day we're recording this. So by May 3rd, we'll have episode 100 out.
Okay. So for our listeners, what are some of the basic stories and examples? What are the things you dig into with your content?
Yeah, definitely. So for me, for the podcast, the main four pillars I talk about are personal finance, entrepreneurship, mindset, and real estate investing. I'm really going to start doubling down and really more so focusing on the entrepreneur side of things and how young people can get into entrepreneurship. People like me who grew up in the projects, who grew up in, households with neither parents in there, that money wasn't around, and Section 8 and food stamps, et cetera, growing up inner city, people like that, how could they go from not having a clue about any of this entrepreneur money game to successful entrepreneurs while I'm literally in real time and going on my own journey and helping other people come along the way with me. So that's pretty much what people could expect over there on that front.
I love that because in my world, I'm talking to people about housing financing for my day job, and it's like the biggest limiting factor that we see is just people having enough money saved for down payment and closing. And that's one thing that we try to be able to tackle and help people put a plan together, or it be credit building or savings building. And at the end of the day, most people, there's not much to cut in terms of a budget. And well, how else do you save money? A lot of people are doing creative things to be able to generate more income, adding more income streams, and kind of bringing the entrepreneurship part of it, building a business, building something that's going to generate extra income for your household. Something I think is just more important to be talking about. From an entrepreneurship standpoint, where you are in your journey, can you share a little bit about kind of what you have going on? So you got the podcast. What else is going on in your world? How did that start? Where did it come from?
Yeah, so for me, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in a project, et cetera, et cetera. So as you could probably tell from my story, my shortened version, money wasn't in abundance growing up. And entrepreneurship, the thought of starting a business wasn't something that was on my mind at all. It wasn't even in the backburner. It was not in my mind at all. And so growing up, I didn't have the paper out. I wasn't selling the lemonade stands and the lemonade juice, and I didn't have the candy bars in school. And I was just your typical kid, right? Playing video games, and I got into sports, and then playing video games and sports and school, etc. was my general life. And for me, I went to college, graduated high school 2019, got into 13 schools, and I was my freshman year, literally towards the spring semester. I still remember like it was yesterday because this is not too long ago. Pretty much that's when the pandemic took over the world. The world shut down. And now I'm in my freshman year, and my whole college experience is swept from me. And for me, fast forward a little bit, once I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, my fall semester of my sophomore year, it changed my paradigm and made me realize that there was another way of viewing the world out there that wasn't being taught in schools, wasn't being taught in my environment, and more importantly, wasn't being taught at home. So that winter break, I pretty much went on a giant, down a rabbit hole of personal finance and entrepreneurship and figuring out how to learn about this stuff. And when I came back that spring semester, my sophomore year, we were still online. And it was like, man, I didn't spend this whole winter break learning more about things that actually matter than almost all my years of schooling combined. And from there, I couldn't unsee the light anymore. So I just decided, with the whole world being uncertain, the only thing I was certain of was myself. So I decided to drop out, sign up for my real estate licensing course. And since then, I never looked back. And that's how I got into the entrepreneurship side of things.
That's awesome. So you got your real estate license along the way. And are you still practicing real estate, or is that something that you did or still doing? Or
Yeah, so my license is still active, but I'm not actively practicing at all. If anything, if anyone were to come my way, I would just refer it out and just take the referral commission. But somewhere along the journey, this is a game of entrepreneurship. It's so fun and interesting because it never plays out how you draw it up. It's like football, man. It's no matter what play the coaches call, something's gonna happen that you didn't expect, and then from there, it's like you either got flight or freeze, man. And you got to figure it out once the play is hiked. And so a lot of that stuff is similar to football. I see it. So for me, a lot of the plans I originally drew up didn't play out as planned at all. So I had to quickly pivot and quickly realign myself to get focused and get back on the horse because this real estate stuff for me didn't work out. But along the way, so I got licensed after I turned 20, 2 weeks after, and I was with Keller Williams. And about 4 months after, or a couple months after, I joined a couple like big groups on Facebook and Zoom calls. And I would hop on these groups and I would just listen and just absorb all their knowledge. And one day they were talking about social media. I was in a mastermind on Clubhouse, and they're usually on from 6:30 to 7 a.m. And they were covering social media. And I'm in the gym right now. And for anyone that works out early in the morning, there's always someone randomly making weird grunts and dropping weights and all these random noises. So I was like, okay, I can't actually participate in a Clubhouse call. I'll just type up my quick tips on Facebook and put it in the Facebook group. And that led to me teaching a class that had over 440 people sign up for on pretty much intro to video, all because the host of the call asked me to teach a class based off that one Facebook post that I made. And then from there, I've been teaching realtors pretty much across the country in Canada how to leverage social media and marketing and building a strong online presence. And I originally wanted to do content creation services. So I started Stop and Stare Media, which comes from a little saying I had, which was stop and stare, don't touch the hair. There's a whole story behind that. I'll skip for now, but I started Stop and Stare Media. I'm going to do content creation services. My first client, literally, I realized that I hate creating content for people. I was going to do done for you services. I despise creating content because at that time I was already posting 3 to 4 reels a day every day for myself. So doing it for other people, I was like, this is a drag. So I scrapped that idea up, my $1 million idea down the toilet. And then this past January, I taught a class on how to leverage ChatGPT for your marketing. And that class blew up. I had like 300 people sign up for that. And the next, a month later, NAR wanted to come out with an article on ChatGPT and how it'll affect the real estate industry. And I already was like a month in advance after I taught my class. I was like, man, I know my stuff. And I've been teaching this group of people for a little over a year now. Like I have like massive authority within that group. Like, how do I turn this into something that's not done for you services? Because I despise that. And so I was like, I love the teaching aspect side of things. How do I monetize that? And then boom, a course came to mind. But I was stuck in this weird dilemma where it's like I can either charge like $5. There's like a million other social media courses on marketing for realtors. So it's like I can either charge $5 so people will buy it, or need to have a big, massive following for me to charge actually what I want to charge. And so it's like, well, I didn't want to do either of those two things. So I decided to pick an angle that was good for me. And my strong suit was podcast guesting because I've guested now on a little over 100 shows just for this year alone. And I've also have hundreds of people reach out to hop on my show. So I created that into a course. And now I have about 7 students. Literally today, I picked up another student into the course. And now I'm pretty much just doing that. So very long-winded answer, but long story short, it's the podcast and this course creation, this course, I guess course creator niche, I guess you could call it, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. So you do the podcast that gets you out in front of a lot of people that connect with your message and what you may be able to help them in terms of solving a problem. Then you've got a course or multiple courses to be able to help them. One course. And that's what the social media part of it.
Yeah. So it's been difficult too, because I am very stubborn. And there's an old quote and it's in the Bible. And it's like, pretty much talks about how you shouldn't serve two masters. Like you can't serve two masters. And so for me, I made it pretty difficult on myself because my entrepreneurship podcast is my ideal avatar for that is other young adults that grew up inner city, want to get off the traditional track and get into entrepreneurship. My ideal avatar for my course is non-tech savvy real estate agents. So it's like it's two separate ideal avatars. So it's not like I'm funneling people from the entrepreneurship podcast into my course. It's two different things that I had going on. So it makes it a little harder on me. But pretty much now that my podcast, we're about to hit episode 100. So for me, it's like I was doing like pretty much solely interview style episodes for a long time. And this year I started adding more solo style episodes where I'm just like at the end of the month recapping how the month was for me and what I've been learning. But now, as I said, I'm gonna start shying away from like the real estate investing topics and the personal finance and the mindset topics, and just kind of just really hone in on that entrepreneurship side of things, and start doing a lot more solo style episodes where I talk about the lessons that I'm learning in my entrepreneurial endeavor and my entrepreneurial journey, with this marketing stuff that I got going on.
That's awesome. I mean, and as we're talking about this, right? I mean, you're talking to people about social media, people that need help, right? Also, people that may be in a situation where they don't have the type of resources or economic, an upbringing and family support or whatever the situation may be. You can talk about, growing up in the inner city, that you mentioned for yourself. And so there's a lot of people who need something in different forms or fashions in terms of where they're trying to go. And you can provide that person with all the information and resources. Some people are either going to accept it, some people are not. Some people are either going to be ready to be able to listen and implement, some people are not. And when you read that book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, I know a lot of people who read that book and have done nothing with entrepreneurship or real estate or whatever. It's like, so as I'm kind of painting the picture of either some people are ready, some people are not ready. What kind of messaging or what do you think? What do you think? How do you help that person who needs the help? How do you get them closer to be able to find the solution or being willing to take action on the solution?
In which regard? Are you talking about generally or in
Uh,
the
with a couple, let's just take some of the people that you're working with. What are
yeah.
some of the how are people kind of coming to the realization that, hey, I need to be able to take action on whether it be social media or someone on the entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah.
What's that
Yeah.
process like?
I'll start with both, right? So I'll answer both. So for the entrepreneurial side of things, I generally feel that entrepreneurship is one of the best ways to take life into your own hands. And for entrepreneurship, 9 out of 10 of businesses fail. But I actually just talking to someone today, and he was like, businesses don't fail, people fail, right? It's the people that cause the business to fail, not the business. A lot of times there's great ideas, just the people running them. So it's like when it comes to getting people started there that are kind of on the fence and don't really know, what to do and stuff like that. I mean, and this is for everything. It's just breaking it down into simple, like it's taking away all the fluff, taking away all the complexity. So many people forget that not everyone talks in acronyms and jargons and KPIs and CPM and all this stuff and PMI. And there's like each industry has its own like specific acronyms and jargon. It's like the people who haven't gotten into that industry or are in that space don't understand anything you're saying. And there's a level of wisdom that comes with simplicity. And it's very easy to describe something in a lot of words, but it's super hard to get that same message across with the least amount of words as possible. That's what I love in Eastern philosophy because like a lot of these concepts, and I'm not a super astute like philosopher, so I don't know all the concepts, but a lot of the ones that I do recognize, it's like, for example, ikigai. It stands for your reason for being. You're like how to find your purpose essentially, and it's like, but it's just one word, right? In the Japanese culture, and for that, for the entrepreneurship side of things specifically, it's mainly like figuring out where they currently are and where they want to be and just kind of like reverse engineering it. For like the real estate side of things, it's really just realizing that most realtors suck at marketing. Like the real estate industry is extremely behind when it comes to marketing for at least in most realtors cases. And it's ironic because if you look at the NAR report, one of the main reasons why people hire a realtor to work with them is to sell them to market their property. And despite that, most realtors take absolutely zero time trying to figure out and learn marketing. And it's literally your job description. That's what people want you to do. They're not hiring you to, go dance in front of their lawn and like and throw an open house party. They're hiring you to market their property, right? I mean, that could be a marketing strategy, but knowing what the people actually want. So it's like we always, at least in that space, it's showing them that I recently made a switch because I started early on teaching like social media platform specific classes. But like those classes within like the week almost with the way the algorithm changes, like by the time the week over, all that content's already useless. So it's like learning like actual tried and proven marketing principle that stand the test of time, like direct marketing principles and applying that into real estate. Like I was just on a call today with the client that I onboarded, student that I onboarded, and I was pretty much telling her about creating an ideal avatar. It's like even stuff like that sounds so foreign to most realtors. It's like, okay, what are you posting right now? She was telling me, she was like, yeah, John, I just posted like some just listeds here and there, so maybe some market stats. And I have a VA, and then she posts like sometime like recipes with like, oh, it's a spring market. Here are some things for a new home. And it's like, all right, who's your ideal avatar? It's like, oh, I'm kind of a generalist. I kind of just like I work with everyone from people listing $20,000 properties to $900,000 properties, and it's like that's great and all, but for marketing purposes, it's like you're not going to get anybody. So it's like helping them understand like how to market properly and start focusing on things that actually want generate actual impact, and not the little stuff like time to post and hashtags to use, because that stuff is
Right.
here today, gone tomorrow.
Yep. So for listeners out there, speaking of social media, where can they find you? What's the best place to find you on social media?
Yeah, definitely. It'll be a John Mendez official will be the best place to find me at. That's where I'm the most active. You
Okay.
can see all the real estate videos that I was posting back when I was actually focused on real estate. Had all the trending audios and the disappearing captions and the disappearing words and the lip syncing and all that stuff. Like, I was doing that consistently for months on end.
And right now, how would you explain kind of your time and energy towards that content right now?
Right now, I don't spend any time at all making that content. It's great and all, but as I said, you have to spend too much time keeping up with stuff. And so now I'm a big proponent like of podcast guesting. So we're both podcasters ourselves, and
Mhm.
we see like all these people that come onto our shows, and we know as podcasters, we know how much time goes into prepping and editing and posting and all this stuff, creating the stuff to post on social media, the content. Like we know how much time that goes into it as podcasters. These people just show up, they talk for an hour, and then boom, now our audience goes to them. They didn't spend any time finding these people, they didn't spend any time cultivating this amazing community. They just showed up and talked, and now they're getting my community. Right. So I'm a very big proponent of podcast guesting, mainly because one, it's the highest leverage of your time. Because now you partner this up with some other tools that I talk about. So one that anyone listening right now could use, it's called video.ai. And I'm not an affiliate or anything like that. It's just a tool I love using. Video, and that's video.ai. That tool, let's say for this podcast,
Mhm.
when you drop this, I could take the YouTube link or send the raw, if you send me the raw file, I'll upload it into video.ai. Video AI uses their algorithm, their software to generate clips for you, and they'll put the clips automatically in Reels format for you. Add the captions. Now, if you're on the paid plan, it'll have like a brand template. So you just set up your brand kit one time, and now it'll save all your colors, your fonts, and stuff like that. So it's pretty much like rinse, wash, repeat. And now you're creating clips on pretty much autopilot. Then you couple that with something like repurpose.io, and then now you have something that's creating the clips for you, and now you have something that's distributing the clips for you. So it's an insane way to leverage your time and your marketing efforts, instead of trying to go on every single day and find a new trending audio and a new caption to use and stuff like that. This is so much more return on your investment in terms of time wise.
Totally. I came across video.ai a little bit ago as well. And like for this type of a video format with Zoom, it's got the wide angle and doesn't really work very well for vertical video. And I think on that platform, you can also switch the visuals or switch
Hmm.
the focus part of the actual screen. So it's pretty dynamic,
Yeah.
dynamic. So that's awesome. And I think we're talking about social media, talking about podcasting, for example. And, I never thought I'd have a podcast, and the thought never crossed my mind ever. I knew that I wanted to be able to build a platform that helped somebody kind of inspire, show somebody the tools and resources and how to build wealth. And there's a million ways that somebody can build wealth in this environment, whether it be real estate or, social media or stocks or crypto, whatever it is. Right. Um, and I never thought about a podcast. So you never know where things are going to go. Things are going to take you. Like you mentioned before, you have a plan, and then sometimes you just got to throw the playbook out and, just react and keep going. Um, but from a standpoint of your journey, you mentioned starting out, and, here you are, you've got a podcast. You said 100 podcasts over the past few months here. When you look at that journey and where you are right now, I mean, what's the biggest thing that you've learned along the way?
That my message matters. That's the biggest thing, that my message matters. I was hesitant with my podcast. I was gonna start it up because I know I was gonna talk about myself and my journey. You can't discredit my journey, right? No, it's my show, so that was easy. But in terms of getting on other shows, it was like, what on earth am I going to talk about? Of course, I have a lot to say, but it's like it's always that imposter syndrome that kicks in a little bit. It's like, oh, have I accomplished enough? I'm still in the beginning of my journey. I'm probably the youngest person that's hopping on most of these people's podcasts,
Hmm.
and so it's like, for me, it was like, man, it was a little bit of imposter syndrome, but also, I was also looking back and analyzing all the people who pitched me to hop on my show. I was listening to podcasts on how to pitch podcasts. I was watching YouTube videos on how to pitch podcasts. So I was doing all this stuff and figuring out like what's the best way to pitch somebody. And then, I just made a one sheet, hired a guy on Fiverr, and I started like pretty much pitching podcasts. And I was getting a lot of success, almost too much success. Like my January and February were slammed with podcast interviews. And now it's like on the other side of things, I also had a speaker school that I went to in March. And being having the gift of gab is great for small talk, which I had, which is something that played into my favor. But being able to deliver an impactful message, man, there's a difference between just small talk and really impacting someone's life with words. And those 100 podcast episodes definitely shortened the time horizon that would have taken me to get from where I was to where I am now in terms of how I can communicate and how effectively I can communicate. But it's something that, man, throughout that journey, a lot of these thoughts that I was coming up with is some stuff that I've pretty much accumulated from all the people that I was able and fortunate and blessed to come across, and just kind of aggregated it and put it together and put my own spin on it based on my own personal experience. And a lot of people are finding a lot of value in that stuff. And as I'm guessing on some of these podcasts, it's like, man, John, like a lot of stuff you talk about is a lot deeper than what most 21-year-olds talk about. It's like I always been a sucker for deep talks, and it was just great being able to find other people that are similar. And this podcast space is such a small world. Like I've had one guy whose podcast I hopped on. He is in the UK. And then there's a guy that hopped on my virtual summit. He was that guy's like business coach for a couple months back a couple years ago. So it was like, man, this podcasting space that we're in, man, it's so niche. And so like now that I'm going out on the guesting side of things, it's like I've been able to create so many more connections, so many more um, you know, so much more of an online presence. And as I said, just re-emphasize the fact that people actually want to hear me, not just on my own show, but other people are also interested in what I had to say, which kind of helped me get over that imposter syndrome a lot.
Yeah, I mean, like kind of going back to I started a podcast, didn't never thought I'd be able to do it. Don't even know, still don't know what the hell I'm doing. And when you do the math on it, I think there's like 3.5 million podcasts out there, and then like 256,000 podcasts are in the last 90 days are producing an episode a week. So like literally by showing up every single week, like we're in the top 7%. Like by just showing up every single day. And like that's the thing, is that a lot of this stuff, like just getting over those things at some point in time, getting past the top imposter syndrome, getting past your own fears and doubts, like that's 90% a lot of times of just getting to where you want to go. And podcasting isn't for everybody, but if you can fit into your world and fit it into your business, I mean, it's definitely productive. Like you mentioned, it can open up doors that you may not even ever dreamed of. Social media, podcasting.
I was gonna add to that just in terms of doors. So
Yeah,
I'll share with you
yeah,
one of my favorite
yeah.
stories.
Please.
Random story, right? So back in October, one of my guests hopped on. He mentioned something about like real estate investing, and that's when I was creating like clips, a lot of clips for my podcast. And I used like some clickbait titles on YouTube Shorts. I used like some super clickbait titles. Anyone on YouTube Shorts, man, if you could get that headline right, it'll definitely bump up your views. So get good at writing headlines. So my headline was something like how to invest in real estate like Grant Cardone with like some house emoji or something like that. Like something super clickbaity. I forgot exactly what I said. And then I get an email a couple days later, and it's from 10X Stage Agency. So I knew 10X, but I didn't know what stage agency was. It's like, what's going on here? And it was like, hey man, we just seen their YouTube short about how to invest like Grant Cardone, whatever. And he was like, hey, I can't get you in contact with Grant, but I do work with the 10X speaker agency. And we have tons of amazing speakers that are always looking for amazing stages and platforms such as yourself to hop on to deliver value. What's your, I forget what exactly they asked me. Long story short, I ended up connecting with them. They sent me a couple speakers. Now, one of the speakers didn't schedule with me. So in January, I had followed back up. I was like, hey, when someone so never actually scheduled to hop on, even though we had our pre-show call. Like, oh, no worries, we'll get back to you. In the meantime, we actually have a new round of speakers that are coming in. Like, do any of these guys fit your criteria? And a couple of them did, so I got connected with them. They were like, hey, we also have this opportunity to be a virtual judge for the 10X speaker, the Great American Speak Off, which was going to be at Grant Cardone's conference this past February. So I got to be a virtual judge with that. And through that, I was able to connect with some really big entrepreneurs. So like my 100th episode is going to be with David Meltzer. I have a guy named Ken Johnson, another big time entrepreneur, well connected in the space. I have a bunch of big people that I was able to connect with through that opportunity, which just came from a YouTube short with a little clickbaity title that I got from a podcast interview.
That's awesome. I love it. Yeah, because by literally doing the work, not knowing what the outcome is going to be, just doing the work over and over, things pop up and open up that you never could have imagined. From a standpoint of the business, right? You mentioned, the course, the online platform, podcasting. At what point in time did you say, hey, you know what, like this is actually going to work? Like this is the point where, hey, this is going to be a viable business model that's going to be sustainable.
Yeah. So for me, so last year, and hence the reason why my bio was look so fancy. I mean, I hired someone, but I was in real estate. I was working at a restaurant. I had the social media classes I was teaching. I had the podcast running up at the same time. I was doing all these things, and as I said, it looked great for the bio, but in all reality, everything was failing, man. And it was really, really big ego hit. Like, there's a couple nights where I would just look into myself, like, "Yo, what the f am I doing with myself?" And just really lost, contemplating whether it was worth it. And it was one of the things that I had to like learn to keep aside in terms of my ego, because I thought that I could, build Rome and build the Leaning Tower of Pisa and build the Great Wall of China all at the same time in the same day. And I didn't really realize how difficult entrepreneurship was. And so I'm this kid that's, super hardworking and driven and, charismatic and got good energy, and I'm very focused. And despite that, everything was failing. Like, I'm talking, my podcast numbers were going down month after month. I only did 3 rentals last year. And I was, for my marketing company, as I said, most of my classes were for free, so I wasn't getting any money. And then when I tried to do content creation services, I realized I hated it. So, and I wanted to leave the restaurant back in February of last year, and I'm still there now. So it's like the original plan that I drew up didn't go as planned at all. So around September, I read this book called The Purpose Factor, and I started thinking and really reflecting on my life. And I was just trying to figure out, like, man, like, what is it I'm really supposed to do? And that's when I tried to shift into the stop and stare media thing. And then from there, I was like, man, I hate working with content creation services. So now that $1 million idea was flushed down the toilet. And so now I'm there just, just reflecting on life. Like, what am I going to do? And I realized, after coming across this concept called Ikigai, which stands for your reason for being, it's a Japanese concept. And after did some internal work, some reflecting, and I realized that I was procrastinating from doing what I want to do for so long, because not because I was scared, not because I was worried, but because I wasn't aligned with what I was really meant to do. So I was trying to do the podcasting and all this other stuff, not the podcast, the real estate stuff, and get into real estate investing and become a top agent. And that's not what I was called to do. Right. So I was spending all this time procrastinating because I was doing too much and trying to do everything at once instead of doing the thing I was called. So then I started doubling down on the podcast in December. And that's when I started podcast guesting. And that's also when doors started opening up for me. That's when the 10X stage opportunity got presented to me. And then I spoke at Podfest Expo in January this year. And then I spoke at Podfest Global, which is a virtual conference last month. And I got another summit I'm speaking on tomorrow. And all these different opportunities started to open up once I let all these other decisions die, all these other opportunities die off. And the suffix of the word, decide, the IDE part, it means to kill off. And I had to kill off a lot of these other opportunities so that I could really focus and start making traction. And once I decided to really focus and go all in the podcast, man, doors started opening up left and right. And then from there, the idea to start a course was like, oh my goodness, I could actually still get paid for this marketing stuff I was doing for free for the past year. I just had to come at it from a different angle. I didn't have to do the work for the people. I could just create this course, front load all the work, but then spend time selling it. And then once the course is created, all you need to do is really just acquire and fulfill. which is a lot easier than actually creating. So I was like, man, all these new opportunities, and I had this newfound bandwidth to actually take on all this stuff and take advantage of all this stuff. So around December last year, to answer your question, when I really started realizing, like, hey, like I'm on something here.
Yeah. And how long of a journey did it take to go from boom, this is what I want to do. I know I want to become an entrepreneur from when you read that book until that moment
Yeah.
where you said, hey, you know what, like this door's opening up because I doubled down on the podcast. Like how long of a journey was that?
Yeah, so November or October of 2020 is when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad for the first time.
Okay.
And December is when I fully started to get serious and double down on the podcast. So a little over 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah, a
Right.
little over 2 years, man.
Yeah. And it's like, kind of what the reason why I wanted to kind of start this whole platform is like, what could I have told myself 10 years ago, in terms of building wealth habits, saving money, automating savings. But it's like, no matter what I told myself, would I have listened? Was I going to be ready to actually listen and put the work in and actually implement? And I think doing the actual work, failing and succeeding and failing and succeeding, like that changes who you are, like, you don't get to that point where you get those realizations without putting all the work in and the uncertainty and the doubting yourself, like, so if you're talking to an entrepreneur out there, I mean, like, how do you explain that? How do you share with somebody, what to expect? Because it's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time for it all to kind of fit together.
Yeah, it's one of those things where that overnight success, you don't see the 10 years of work they put in before that one night where it kicked off, right? So it's a lot of time over attention, under attention over time, right? So it's like you got to be in that valley of despair, that valley of darkness, that abyss, right? We all go through it as entrepreneurs, no matter what it is. There's no way around it. We all walk through some type of valley of despair, right? And being in there, for me, as I said, I was super naive. I thought because I was young, hungry, ambitious, I could do everything at the same time. Like if I had just set my focus out on one thing, then I probably could have succeeded a lot quicker, especially if I had all my bandwidth solely focused on how do I grow one thing. But life, we stay poor until we learn all the lessons that we need to learn to succeed, right? And that's why so many people who win the lottery, that's why so many people who go to the league and the NBA and NFL go bankrupt after, is because the success and the fame comes so quickly that they didn't learn the lessons necessary to maintain, preserve, and keep that growing. So don't try to skip out on the journey. And so many people will be like, "Hey, man, I would never wish my journey on everyone else. Like it was hard." But it's like, man, that journey made you who you are today. So why wouldn't you wish that on other people? I was literally just talking about this before I hopped on here, a couple hours ago. It's like I went through some hard stuff. And of course, I would recommend everyone else go through it because I came out pretty okay. And I think that I'm a pretty good guy. And I think that more of me would be a pretty good thing. Because if not, why would I not want people to go through what I went through if I'm the production, if I'm the product of it? If I believe that I'm a genuinely good person and I'm genuinely here to and providing value to, my customers in the world, why wouldn't I want people to go through what I went through? And so it's like, know that it's going to be hard and there's no shortcut, there's no corner cutting to success. You have to go through some type of mud. And it may not even be in your business. That's the hardest part to come to terms with. The valley you might be going through, man, you might have a divorce that's on the way. You may have a child that autistic or something like that. You may have a family member that passed away too soon. Man, you might get hit with a curveball that you never even seen coming. And it may not be a hardship directly in your business, right? But the personal hardships, I'd say, are 10 times harder than whatever you could face business wise. And so it's like a lot of the stuff that hit us and get us, on our feet are stuff that come from left field that we could have never prepared for. So it's like, know that it'll happen to you. Know that, don't be naive enough like me to think that just because you have all the traits of an entrepreneur and that you could make it all happen without taking, diligent, focused effort. You have to be focused when starting off. And shiny object syndrome is a B word. It'll take you
Mm-hmm.
completely off track, that things that you're supposed to do. And it ran me wild in 2022. So I'd say stay on the lookout for 2020, not 2022. Stay on the lookout for shiny object syndrome and definitely realize that the valley of despair is something that we all walk through, and don't shy away from it. All the good stuff is on the other side. So keep on pushing through. You're in the right place, um and don't get sidetracked for shiny object syndrome. Probably
Yeah.
my two best pieces of advice.
I kind of want to dig into that a little bit more, right? So, you're going through the process. 2022 is happening. You kind of have your eggs spread too thin, so to speak. You mentioned, not focusing enough on and doubling down on maybe one thing or focusing on one thing. And then you also talked about, the nights of despair, right? So like, what are the things that are going through your mind? You're not where you want to be. You're not hitting your goals. What's keeping you focused on your goal? What is your goal? How do you pull yourself out of that kind of mental state of despair and keeping focused on the mission?
It's bigger than me. It's everything I do for is way bigger than me. It was never for me. It was always something beyond me. And one of the things that I learned back in 12th grade, so my English teacher, he would go on random philosophical tangents. And one of the ones that in one of the classes that he talked about, we were covering Plato's allegory of the cave. And he pretty much talked about how the duty of the enlightened is to enlighten the unenlightened. The duty of the enlightened is to enlighten the unenlightened. And when I heard that quote, I was like, man, this is facts. Like this is something that I'm going to make implement into my life and have it be my North Star, like the duty of the enlightened. As soon as I learn something, as soon as I go through something, my job then becomes to tell everyone I can about it so that I can help others grow. And before I got into entrepreneurship, but I adopted that mindset. And then as I got into real estate, the mindset of coming from contribution and just providing value, being of service to other people. And as I said, and it fell right in line with my quote of the duty of the enlightened is to enlighten the unenlightened. And knowing that a purpose is something that you may never ever be able to actually achieve. It's something that transcends you, something that's bigger than life. And the difference between a purpose and a goal is that a goal is usually quantifiable, and a goal is something that you could accomplish in your lifetime. A purpose is something bigger. Like think Moses in the desert, right? Moses never made it to the promised land. Think MLK and I had a dream. He never got to see what he was working towards. But knowing that you are on the track, knowing that you are on your path is what keeps me going. And knowing that I may not see where I'm headed or where I'm trying to get to, but if I could pave the way and to relay the baton for the next person to run and get there, it's pretty much what I'm doing essentially. And I just so happen to start my journey of entrepreneurship and be willing to document it a lot sooner. I'm not the world's most successful entrepreneur at this age. Like I'm not in that regard anyone special, but I'm documenting the journey. I'm showing up and showcasing the dark side, the backside, the ups and the downs and the middles and the peaks and the valleys and all that stuff so that people along the way can see it. Cause it's one of those things where it's like one of the most selfish things you could do is live your entire life, however long, let's say you live to 75 years of a unique experience that no one ever will live exactly how you did. And you just kept that to yourself. Like that is one of the most selfish things I feel like you could do. So it's like, how do I get out everything that I have to people that will probably help them? And how do I be of value? And knowing that at the end of this, when everything's all said and done, I don't want to have anything left in the tank. I want to have left it all on the field. So just like I said, back in football, man, after them football games, I could eat a horse and nap for 3 days because every game I just left it out there. And that's the same way I think that applies to life. It's like just leave it all out there on the field. You only get one. This game of life is high stakes. You don't come out of it alive, right? There's no one that can come out of it alive. So you might as well go all out.
Totally. One of the analogies that I kind of use is, the whole, hey, you can bring a horse to water analogy, but you can't make it drink. And, that type of thing where, yeah, here's the resources, here's the tools, and you can help somebody, get better at whatever they're trying to get better at. But at the same time, it's like, we have this kind of, economic or societal subconscious of, hey, we're going to get a job, we're going to have a 401k or a pension, and we're going to retire at 60, whatever, and that's kind of the normal ideology that we all grew up with, and, with our parents and grandparents and whatever. And this whole entrepreneurial mindset of, hey, like, I can have a job, but I can also have a thing I do on the side and build a business on the side. I'm going to have this extra lane that I'm doing to build for something for myself, whether it's real estate or a business or whatever it is, just having something else you can control that destiny. And you fast forward the clock 10, 20, 30 years, and those actions, they compound. So you're kind of talking about that. It's like you can't make somebody go down that path. But the more you talk about it, the more you do it, the more you show them, you kind of build this gravitational force around yourself where people in your network, maybe it's family, maybe it's friends, they see you doing these things, and maybe you rub off on those people. Um, is there anybody that comes to mind that's in your circle that, hey, like they didn't seem like they were going to go down that path, but maybe they saw something that you did or something you said that they took action on something that maybe you surprised you?
I'd say, well, so for me, someone that I didn't see going down this path. So for the pandemic, the world kind of shut down for a little while, and you lost touch with a lot of people. So one of the guys I used to play football with, his name is Darren. He's a year younger than me. He was a junior when I was a senior in high school. And so he actually reached out to me one time and he was like, "Hey, John, like, I want to get my real estate license." And I listened to your episodes, and this is like long before I started getting into interviews. Like, so he listened to one of my episodes, and actually, I think this might have been before he even I dropped the podcast, but he wanted to get into real estate. And I was like, yeah, I got my license, and I helped him out a little bit. And he said he was gonna take his class, and then we lost touch for a little while. And then he's listening to the podcast, and now he's an agent at the office that I'm at. And although I'm not focused on real estate anymore, he's over there like, doing rental deals and stuff like that, and starting to spread his wings. And he's been supporting the podcast for quite some time. But it's like the people that you never know are also out there as well. Because usually, what surprised me most is that one, as you probably already know, friends and family usually don't support you anywhere near as much as strangers do. And for me, that's someone that I already knew that was in my life. So for him, one to also be into getting, he went to UConn similar to me. He wanted to get into real estate similar to me, right? He ended up dropping out of college similar to me, right? And he also was a supporter of the podcast. And so it's like stuff like that. And he's been listening to the podcast since like it was like a few episodes out and been listening since, and pretty much doesn't really miss that many episodes. And like things like that, it's exciting to see other people that are young and knowing that I was also part of his decision for dropping out, for getting into real estate, for getting his license, for doing what he's doing now. Not entirely. I'm not going to take all his credit. Of course, he did it on his own right, but being able to help someone, as I said, I was like, man, like he's exactly who my ideal avatar is. And so it's like now, whenever I got new ideas for my podcast specifically, I always reach out to him like, yo, what you think about this? Like, yo, give me the rundown.
Yeah.
Like, what's your thoughts? Good, bad, and different. Like, what's your thinking? And it's like, and I was a direct piece in that puzzle that helped transpire what he has going on now.
That's awesome. So, people that are in their teens or 20s, or maybe they went to college, maybe they dropped out, or maybe they have a job in their 20s and they're, searching for something more. If you were to give advice to somebody, that wants to learn more about the entrepreneurial path and what's out there, what's possible, how would you describe that, or where would you tell them to go in terms of resources or conversations? I mean, who's inspired you along the way? How would you describe that?
Yeah, I'd say, what does it look like, man? Someone who has no business talking to anyone successful was able to meet a billionaire before he turned 21. It's like that's the type of people you could potentially connect with on this entrepreneurial journey. People who have achieved success far greater than most people's families, entire families combined. Like you can meet some extremely amazing people, make some very meaningful connections, see some beautiful sights, see like, go to conferences, network with people that understand you. Like, this entrepreneurship space, man, it's so small, it, man. And it's like we have so many people that don't understand how we work and how we take, and like to go to some of these conferences and it's just like a bunch of entrepreneurs that are all having fun and looking to grow and looking to invest in themselves and take each other to the next level. It's like you get into that energy and it's like contagious, man. It really does lift you up. And for anyone that wants to get started, man, I'd say Alex Hormozy is probably one of the best people to look up to get started. He's very, very deep thinker. He's not with all the rah 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 like type of like motivational BS stuff. Like he just like a super tactical, practical entrepreneur guy, worth over $100 million, only like 34 years old, was like $100 million net worth by like before 30 or 31, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like for anyone that's young and looking to get started, man, that's a perfect person to start looking up to because he's still relatively super young, super successful, and is just doing it and being super transparent and not genuine about it. Doesn't have anything to sell.
I love that. Yeah. Speaking of nothing to sell, I think his book, 100 Million Offer, I think
Yeah, I
he
have
like
it somewhere
he's,
around here.
do you? I've got it on my phone, but
It's in my closet.
you can buy it on Kindle or whatever for like $1. Like he's trying to just sell it as cheaply as possible to get it in people's hands. They want to give you the tools to be able to build a business. And then, hey, what's his name of his company? I'm trying to think. Is it
Acquisitions.com.
okay? Yeah, because then they take companies from like 10 million
Yeah.
to whatever 100 million or whatever.
Yeah.
So
His goal, he says, is not to make your first dollar, to make your last dollar you ever need. So he only works with companies that are doing like 5 million a year plus. So it's like
okay,
if you're not in that range, he doesn't have anything to offer you to work with you. So it's like like what he's doing is all for genuine stuff, because it's like majority of the people don't have $5 million businesses. Despite that, he posts tons of free game, tons of amazing content. He has a podcast, his
yeah.
YouTube channel, and there's tons of other amazing people. So if he's not your cup of tea, but in terms of just like actual business entrepreneurship, that guy is like he's a different caliber.
Mhm. If you had one recommendation of maybe a side hustle or industry or type of thing to do, what's an example of a go-to for somebody to kind of just dip their toes into the entrepreneurial world and maybe get started?
Yeah, podcasting. That is my go-to, because you could take a quote unquote podcast, and now instead of like, hey, Mr. Successful Guy, I would love to take you out for lunch and for 30 minutes and just ask you a couple questions. It's like, hey, I'm actually debuting a brand new show highlighting local entrepreneurs that are super successful and have accomplished a ton in life. I would love for you to be my premiere debut episode. Would you be interested? Now it goes from, hey kid, I'm sorry, I don't have too much time, to, oh my goodness, you want me on your show for your debut episode? Yeah, let's get something going. And they might even give you, instead of 30 minutes, they might hop on a podcast with you for an hour, hour and a half. Right. So if you don't know where you want to do, find an industry that kind of interests you, and then find some successful local people in that industry and start a podcast. Maybe run it do like 5 or 10 episodes, and don't think of it as a podcast. Shift your perspective, shift your the way you frame it. That's free one-on-one coaching right there that you don't have to pay for. So if you have any interest in marketing, start a quote unquote marketing podcast, interview 10 successful local marketing people, and then ask them literally every single question that you would come to mind, post it onto YouTube, and then you don't even have to pay for Buzzsprout or even Anchor. If you want to use Anchor, Anchor is free to make it look like an official audio podcast, but just upload it to Anchor or YouTube. You don't have to pay. And now it's like, you just got free one-on-one coaching from 10 of the most successful people in this industry or niche that you want to get into without having to pay for anything. So start a podcast and interview with people in anything that you're interested in. And then that way, instead of wasting your time, money, energy, and effort actually doing the do, you can talk to people who have already done it at a very high level, so that if that's something that you want to invest your time in or not.
So what you're saying is there's room for more podcasts out there.
100%. And as I said, if after 10 episodes, you're like, man, marketing sucks, well, then start a new podcast and
Yeah.
do it on, I don't know, brick and mortar, right? Whatever it may be.
Right.
But whatever it is, it's an easy way to get into there. And then those connections, even if you don't, keep it going with marketing, let's say you completely switch, those connections, which are people, assuming you did a good job post interview, like all the gold usually goes off after the record button just gets pressed, right? It's like if you do a good job connecting with that person, now you have potential collaborations in the future. Now, because you made a solid connection during that time that you were with them, interviewing them, not just trying to suck out, the most out of them in your little 1 hour time span.
Yeah.
This is like a big networking collaboration tool.
That's awesome. From a standpoint of your content, I mean, do you have anything out there that's accessible, YouTube or on your channels, that talk about kind of just the basics of getting into podcasting?
Actually, man, I was supposed to drop an episode a while ago on how I started podcasting on my podcast. So at the time being, I do not have an episode out.
That's
But
coming.
one of the guests that I interview, her name is Sunny. She has her own podcasting network. I interviewed her. Her episode probably isn't going to drop for a while, but she's going to be talking about it. So unfortunately, I don't. But if it's something that's valuable, I guess it's something that I may have to put together.
Cool. So that one's coming up. The one with Sunny is coming up.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool. From a standpoint of kind of that moment in your life where just things click, things take you on a different trajectory. Patrick Bet David, CEO of a life
Mhm.
insurance company.
Yeah, he's
you know,
dope.
he's, yeah, he's one of those guys that talks about that moment in your life that just changes your trajectory. I mean, um, is there a moment like that for you that just shifted the way you looked at things?
Yeah, it was definitely the Rich Dad Poor Dad. I'll be frank, man. It wasn't the greatest book I've read, but that book it came at the perfect time, and it introduced these different concepts in a way that didn't offend you. Because a lot of times when something doesn't align with how you already view the world, your guards usually go up, and then you get defensive, and then you can't soak in the information. But Rich Dad Poor Dad, man, it presented the info in a way that was easy to grasp, easy to understand, easy to follow, and I didn't put any walls up. And I was like, man, from there, my curiosity really just ran away with it. But I'd say another amazing point was when I taught my class on ChatGPT, and before that, last year I wasn't charging for my social media stuff. In fact, my first client that I did the content creation services for, I didn't even charge him. It's like I wasn't making any money on the social media stuff that I was doing for a little over a year. And then I taught a class on ChatGPT, and I like at the end mentioned that I'm, upselling to a workshop, and from there pretty much, I ended up making like $4,000 in a day, and I was like, yo, this because my money has been like super tight for a while, trying to figure out all this stuff and doing all these things and running wild and not having a success. Like your money burns after a while. And I'm only still at the restaurant like 20 hours. So I don't have much playing money to go around with. And so it's like I made $4,000 in a day. I was like this is what some people make in a month. Like,
Mm-hmm.
all right, I'm on to something. Like I still remember I got off that webinar that I taught, and like yo, I got because I teach it here and like this is my little home studio office. So I walked out of the room and like I just got on the floor and started praying and like I was just so excited. I was like, I'm on to something. So I guess that was my day because like I actually made some real like $4,000 is like some pretty good chunk of change for most people, especially in a day. That's really good money. So it's like I was like, man, I didn't have to kill anybody or sell any drugs. So I was like,
Right.
I'm definitely doing something good here.
And you mentioned, doing the social media services for a long period of time without collecting any revenue, and then the workshops and like how many of those had you had done of just, adding value to people?
Yeah, so I was I probably done close to like nine throughout 2022. Like nine classes in there, and I throughout there I spoke at one like in-person event for one of my real estate investor friends, and I taught a couple classes for my local office, and then I also was interviewed on a couple like Facebook groups as well on top of the classes. And so I was doing all of those things and not really making anything besides goodwill, which is a really important. Alex Ramosi talks about this, but goodwill compounds faster than almost everything. So it's like what I was doing was I was just letting my goodwill compound. And so when I finally did the class on ChatGPT and upsold to the workshop, and that was my first time actually like selling, I guess, on a webinar, but I didn't really sell. Just like at the end towards the Q&A, I was like, "Hey, everyone! Like, I'm also doing a workshop this Friday. If you're interested, like, there's only 10 spots available, but it may be something that you guys may or like, yeah, something like that. 10 spots available, but something may find value." And as I said, from there, it made like close to $4,000. I was just like, "Oh my goodness! Like, this is like insane."
So if somebody said, "Hey, you know what, John, I need you to help me, take what I know, turn it into being able to build workshops, add value, and then maybe at some point turn it into making money." Could somebody reach out to you and ask you to help pay money to help you coach them on how to build their own little workshop thing and then turn it into a course? And
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, I guess we could figure it out and go on a consult and get it going. But if it's something that enough people want, like for me, I'm very big on ask the community what they want and build what they ask for. So it's like it's not something that I'd say I offer as like something on my website. But if
Mhm.
enough people said like, "Hey, John, like, man, we want to package up our knowledge and put it together," it's like, all right, let's do it. And that's what I was really doing last year is cultivating and building that community, building that audience, and building my authority. And then from now, it's like I'm literally like so far this past week, I've called like 40 of my friends in real estate. As I said, I'm not no longer focused on it, but I'm asking them like, what are their biggest struggles? What are their biggest frustrations? What are some of the fears they have around creating content? What are they currently posting online? Like in an ideal world, how much would you be posting? What would you be posting? What does that look like? What is like if you had a magic wand, what would help you get from point A to point B? What are some of your two biggest questions that you ask when it comes to building like an online presence? Like I'm doing all this market research again because that course that I have now, I have 7 students in there as of today. But I feel like I positioned the course entirely wrong because I didn't do market research. So no real estate agent, wakes up or on like, hey, I need to hop on podcast, or entrepreneurs. They don't wake up saying I need to hop on podcast. They wake up saying like, how do I get people some visibility online? How do I get people to see me? So I had the wrong wrapper on the course. I still managed to get some students, which I'm super grateful for. But now I'm going back to the market research phase to pretty much get on resell the same course just with a new wrapper and reposition it. And I'm pretty much like documenting my journey along the way. So as I
Where
said, I'm super long-winded, but if anyone wanted to I guess help to package their stuff together, I could definitely help that because I'm going through it now.
so that journey that you're talking about, can they would find you on Instagram? Where are you sharing that journey right now?
Yeah, so it's gonna
Of
be on the podcast. So
oh, okay.
on the podcast, I'm gonna be talking about my entrepreneur journey with this marketing stuff I'm doing for all these real estate agents. Right. So the podcast I said was for young people, but the marketing company, that's my entrepreneurial endeavor. So I'm gonna be sharing all the lessons I learned. Pretty much once I get to episode 100, I'm gonna start doing a lot more solo style episodes and just steering away from the interview style episodes, so I can document more of these lessons that I'm learning. Or feel free to definitely reach out.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, the reason I ask more about that is because I think there's just so many people that the light bulbs are coming on about, hey, you know what? There are people out there that are, building a brand online, creating extra streams of income. How can I jump in? How can I do this? How can I build something for myself? And people are doing it so many different ways. Just got to pick the right one
Yeah.
for you. But a lot of these concepts, they do kind of, overlap. So I know we're running out up on time here. You've had an amazing journey over a short period of time, just a couple of years. When you look at 2023, what are some of the goals you're looking to be able to reach, before the end of the year?
Yeah, so definitely top 5% globally podcast on listen notes right now. Right now I'm already top five. So top 2.5%. Sorry.
Cool.
Um, get out of debt. Right now, as of this time, I'm like 40,000 in debt right now. So get out of debt, stop working at the restaurant. Those are probably like my biggest goals. So I guess in the order it'd probably be one, to break free from the restaurant. Then my second goal is going to be becoming completely debt free. Once I break out of restaurant, I'll be a full-time entrepreneur working for myself. Then we're getting debt free. And then from there is going to be landing really my TED Talk. And then from there, focusing back on the podcast to get that to top 2.5% globally. So, and then of course, I've applied to speak at a couple conferences. So I applied to speak at Podcast Movement and Expo. So, fingers crossed. I got my hopes up for there. I already put in the application, so now it's in God's hands to see if I actually get them or not. But speak on a couple more conferences as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Looking forward to watching your journey. Can't wait for a few more of these episodes to be popping up and coming out on these topics. Looking forward to it. So last thing, we talked about a couple of books, talked about, a couple of things along your journey. You come across a hurdle, you come across a failure, what advice would you give to somebody, to be able to keep going, to keep focusing on the end goal versus, so many people stop, right? How do you help somebody not stop?
I think it's a reframe. And one of the things I learned from my day spending with Gary Keller, who was the founder of Keller Williams, just also happened to be a billionaire, is the idea that there's no failing, right? Failing doesn't exist. It's either you win or you learn, right? And as long as you're learning and growing, then there's no failure in that. So when you frame it that way, it's either you win, which is great, or you learn and grow, which is even better. So now when you think of failure, there's no negative outcome associated with it. So now if you're quote unquote failing, that just means you have a lot more to learn and grow. And it's a lot better to learn and grow because who wants to live a life without growth? Right. So winning all the time is great, but after a certain point in time, you're winning all the time. It's like it just becomes dull. Like there's nothing more to it. So it's like be happy that you have a lot more room to learn and grow. That means that there's more potential for you. That means there's more in store for you. So reframe the way you shift the, you see the word failure to something that's not negative, into something that just means that you have opportunity and room to learn and grow.
That's awesome. Yeah. I love that. I think, there's some good clips on Kobe Bryant talking about some of the same stuff. I'm a big basketball fan, so I love that. I love that stuff. There's no failing. But yeah, thank you so much, John Mendez with the Walk to Wealth podcast. Just amazing stuff. I cannot wait to watch more content coming out with your journey, more interviews. And thank you again for your time.
My pleasure. It was a great time.